Thank you very much, everyone, for organizing this conference. I think it's very timely. I think we need to discuss a few questions that have become pretty urgent, not simply politically, but also aesthetically. There's going to be probably echoes and resonances with the various elements that have already been presented as a framework for our conference. So I'm not going to belabor them. Let's just get going with it. My original title, indeed something got lost because I had second thoughts. My original title was, and I'm not going to sing it, what's auto got to do with it, got to do with it, what's the auto, got to do with it. As you can hear, I do miss Tina Turner tremendously. So the point and the question is very simple. What's auto got to do with it? And is it theory? Is it only fiction? Does it mean more than that? But mostly before we embark on the substance of auto and fiction and theory, we should notice something which is a kind of stutter in this title. What's auto got to do with it? There's a kind of repetition. And my go-to understanding of repetition and difference ever since the turn of the century has been this. Let me move to the other thing. Okay. I hate this. Here, you're going to get it for real. Here we go. In full. Here we go. Enjoy this.
Oh, déjà vu.
What did you just say?
Nothing, just a little déjà vu.
What did you see? What happened?
A black cat went past us, and another that looked just like it.
How much like it? Was it the same cat?
Might have been, I'm not sure.
Switch, APOC.
What is it?
Deja vu is usually a glitch in the matrix. It happens when they change something.
Oh my God.
Let's go.
Cut the hard line. It's a trap. Get out.
Oh no.
Oh no.
All right. So this is exactly in a nutshell. You can dispense with what I'm going to say. Everything is in this movie. I'm serious. I'm really serious. I am really serious. Okay, déjà vu. What is déjà vu? It's a French term. There's a stutter. You see the same thing twice. It's déjà vu all over again, as the Americans say. That's baseball. Yogi Berra. And of course, what the déjà vu indexes is a glitch in the matrix when something gets rewritten. And what has gotten rewritten in the matrix at this precise juncture is something which closes off all doors and windows. And then we're back to the Leibnizian monad, qui n'a ni porte ni fenêtre. All right, so I've been hearing, and this is from the summary, the first quote is from a summary of a 2023 book, and let me read it. Whether anonymous, pseudonymous, or trending on social media, authors continue to be an object of critical and readerly interest. Yet theories surrounding authorship have yet to be satisfactorily updated to register the changes wrought on the literary sphere by the advent of the digital age, the recent turn to autofiction, and the current literary climate more generally. Second quote. from a 2020 special issue of the Arizona Quarterly, edited and introduced by Robin Wigman, ici présente. The impact of the recent boom in what US critics and publishers are increasingly calling autofiction is a notable, if curious, phenomenon. Authors such as Chris Kraus, Sheila T., Ben Lerner, Maggie Nelson, and Rachel Cusk, as well as the widely successful translations of works by Knausgård, Elena Ferrante, have gained both readerly and critical accolade. And again, as introduced by Tim Buse today, the call for, or the framework for today's description and tomorrow's conference is, or points to a subjective turn in the literary world, the most obvious sign of which being the emergence of forms of writings that have been called autofiction, auto-theory, critical fabulation, and creative nonfiction. So I do hear from various quarters that there has been a turn to autofiction or to auto-theory, or to one or the others of the hybrids likely to stem from the recombination of a couple of paradigmatic binaries. I have two remarks to this. First one is the déjà vu feeling. I've heard this story, the story of the turn, before. Is it the same old song? I heard it in the 80s, at the time of what was dubbed already the return of the subject, where suddenly, after the years of death of the author and all of the rest of the post-structuralist shebang, Philippe Solers, Alain Robbe-Grillet, Marguerite Duras suddenly came back to a form of enunciation in first person, and apparently decried the past impersonality and strictures of a prior mode of literary enunciation. But I heard it again, all over again, in the 90s, in reference to a turn of mostly women writers, Christine Angot, Camille Laurence, Marie Dariussec, ici présente, who were folded together in spite of major differences under the banner of autofiction. And I've been hearing it again in the 2010s, it seems, when America discovered autos, whether it be autofiction or auto-theory. So I've seen that formation, auto-X, auto-something before, and wondered before, and that's going to be the object of some of my remarks, what's autos got to do with this? Now, translated in the term of Neo and the Matrix, I'm having, indeed, a little bit of déjà vu. And yes, this is the same cat. We're going to spend a couple of days skinning together here. And it's not simply an identical or same cat or one that looks like it. It is the cat itself. It's ipse auto. And yes, I believe déjà vu takes place or occurs as a function in the glitch of the glitch in the matrix that coordinates body, language, and world. And I believe, furthermore, that the object of all those literary vehicles captured under the generic anaphora of auto are occupied in neo fashion with fighting, escaping, or rewriting, or unplugging the matrix. All right. Let's go to autofiction versus auto-theory. Autofiction, it turns out, and I'm quoting from this issue of the Arizona Quarterly, Robin Wigman edited, autofiction, it turns out, has a notable literary and historical lineage. Yet, within this swath of autofiction, something truly new is emerging, auto-theory. Auto-theory constitutes something related to, yet entirely distinct from autofiction, whereas autofiction corresponds primarily to the postmodern literary scene and the rise of the any-person memoir, auto-theory responds more so to the institutionalization and the so-called death of theory. Now, astute critics have remarked that this turn to autofiction, and within autofiction to auto-theory, if there has indeed been a turn, has to be inscribed in a transatlantic circulation of forms and concepts, be it on the side of the auto or on the side of theory. And here I am following most of Robin Wigman's pointers in her intro to that special issue of the Arizona Quarterly I already quoted. Theory is the name under which, and I agree, the US academia, and I add its global extensions, have received post-World War II continental philosophy, and in particular its French declension. And the most recent exemplars in the realm of autofiction and autotheory allege and belabor this genealogy, even sometimes in the form of a denial. What I'm going to try to do is not to rehash it, but to try to sharpen a few points, merely as a function of my own experience of the transatlantic context, be it literary or academic and theoretical. Seen from afar, from across the Atlantic, all those cats in Paris and in Europe are the same shade of gray. Literally the same shade of gray. French theory, what's the difference between a bit of Lacan, a bit of Derrida, a bit of Foucault, and a bit of something else? French feminism, who's to tell how to differentiate between this, that, Wittig, Cixous, Irigaray, and some others? So in the reception of continental philosophy under the name of theory, it's not simply that shades of differences have been elided, but trust me, actual battles, wars, conflicts. And I would say these conflicts, read them metaphorically or allegorically, on how to unplug the matrix, how to live within the matrix, and how to rewrite it. What can be safely said from up close is that autofiction was an artifact, first, of theory itself. That's my first contention. The second one is that both can be said to spring not from a Derridean, not from a Lacanian fount, but from a precise, if we're thinking of the practice of it, the same Barthesian fount, okay? It all starts with Barthes and nobody else. It all starts with Barthes simply because of his article of 1968, Death of the Author, and the rest of his elaboration in the second part of his life around the form of the essay, and is drifting closer and closer to what we would call autofiction or autotheory. The first practitioner of autotheory has to be Roland Barthes. Do you remember this? Do you remember this? It's old. It's 1975. It looks very structuralist, but it's already not structuralist any longer. This is the famous spreadsheet, now it's called a grid, a table, in Le Pacte autobiographique. And you see these little gray things, that's where the gray cat resides. And it's suddenly popping out. You cannot see it against the ground because it's all gray. But I tell you, this is where your gray cat is. It's not a black cat, it's gray. And soon it's going to turn black. Okay. In one of these gray cells, Serge Dubrovsky claims to have found the genre or the inscription of his desire for writing and for autobiography. So if you think about it, autofiction, in the Dubrovskian account on the back cover of Fils in 1978, it has an origin which reads like a quasi-Lacanian fable of entry into the symbolic. Serge Dubrovsky is reading Philippe Lejeune because Serge Dubrovsky is an academic. He's doing theory, and he reads theory. And reading him, he sees this desire for self-writing, self-knowledge, inscribed in the blind, a gray cell of a grid articulating the formal law of an array of genres. And he recognizes himself in one of the spots left empty, or rather gray, and identifies himself at the intersection of two contradictory poetic injunctions or illocutory intentions. And then suddenly, just as in the Lacanian fable, all that floated in the pre-theoretical, pre-symbolic limbo of self-writing will of course be subsequently precipitated into and ordered by this position. The object is then recognized as having always already been autofiction, autofiction avant la lettre ou l'instance de la lettre, and before nomination. Retroactively, or après coup, as they used to say, a corpus appears articulated by the imposition of the name and the delimitation of a place in an order. Autofiction, in a nutshell, is or presents itself as an artifact, a theoretical artifact, a byproduct of the resymbolization or rewriting, structuralist and post-structuralist, of the literary field under the aegis of narratology, neo-rhetorical analysis, the notion of pragmatic pact, and the debate surrounding the theory of fiction. I've looked at this table many, many times. I look at it again, and it's déjà vu, but déjà vu in a different sense. And I'm struck in a way I was not struck before by the fact that Lejeune seems to never have gotten the message sent by Barthes in 1969 and re-forwarded by Foucault in 1969, i.e. at least 5 years prior to the elaboration of the structural rhetorical model of the Pacte autobiographique, that the author was dead. Can't you see it? There's an author. You can say, quibble and say, but it's not the author. It's just the name of the author. All right, I'll grant you that. So, all the book needed for its legibility, the new book, the new genre of book needed for the legibility was the inscription of a proper name, as if on a grave, the grave of the author itself. There remains the name in its function, which would be very consistent with the various figures of the biographical and the autobiographical that Barthes himself deploys after the death of the author and in a kind of posthumous figuration. There's a beautiful quote from Sade Fourier Loyola, and it dates to 1971. You can read the English while I read to you the French, and you'll see, it works. Si j'étais écrivain et mort, comme j'aimerais que ma vie se réduisît par les soins d'un biographe amical et désinvolte, à quelques détails, à quelques goûts, à quelques inflexions, disons des biographèmes dont la distinction et la mobilité pourraient voyager hors de tout destin et venir toucher, à la façon des atomes épicuriens, quelques corps futurs promis à la même dispersion. What you see Roland Barthes doing here is simply a utopia or a hypothesis of a possible posthumous existence of the author, and even of biographies at most traditional of genre, so one which attests to the existence and the solidity of the figure of the author, which was presumably dead just a few years before. And you could say that all of the efforts of Roland Barthes, after the announcement of the declaration of the death of the author, has been ways to resurrect it in forms, or at least to gesture back to the possibility of the figuration of the author, even under conditions of hypothesis, utopia, fantasy, wishful thinking, whatever you want to name it. So look at this, for example. You have it. This is the inner cover, la deuxième de couverture of Roland Barthes by Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes par lui-même in 1975. Notice that it is handwritten and not printed. So it's an inscription, the trace of the body. Tout ceci doit être considéré comme dit par un personnage de roman. So there's an oblicity, but the oblicity is there to re-establish a circuit which was interrupted. Remember in the Matrix when they cut the circuit of the landlines? The landline has been cut. And now you gotta go on your cell. Tout ceci doit être considéré. But the inscription of the body is here, and it is an attempt at rewriting a circuit between a proper name, a life, a body, and the possibility of a first person. Okay. There's another very interesting, this is very similar, and you'll see the oscillation in Roland Barthes. This procedure, which is in 1975 inscribed on the limits, liminally to the text, is going to be reinscribed, but inside the logic of the text in fragments for a lover's discourse. Between the introduction, comment est fait ce texte, how this text is done or is built or was done, and the litany of fragments of the book itself, published in 1977, you have this, which is exactly the same thing, but it's printed. So there's a certain reiterability of this circuit that has been reinstated. The groove, the Barthesian groove is starting to work. And it's going to work all the way into the last seminars. I'm going to accelerate a bit here because we have a number of things still to, articulate if I can. Okay. So we're talking about a circuit that needs to be, a matrix that needs to be re-imprinted, rejigged between various items. Now, first person. These modern fictions of self-knowing, to borrow Robin Wickman's description of them, are not all indexed onto the grammatical first person. And I think this is an important point. The first person has been there all along. Descartes can say, lavatus prodeo, ego cogito. Anyone in antiquity could say ego. There's no problem. The first person is in the grammar, or persons are in the grammar of all known human languages. But that doesn't help in a way. There's no substance, by definition, to the first person, and certainly not to the ways in which it appears to us in language. The personal pronoun or the space, the personal pronoun of first person, or the space from a central point, which is the ipseity, the ego of the enunciator. Like all deictics, it is an empty form in the sense that it depends on the instance of discourse from which it receives its reality or its substance. So your I is empty. Okay. The problem is thus not grammar or language. The problem is the matrix which allows for the shifting into speech of a body. And it's obvious that there's a historicity for this shifting mode for what allows this shifting. It's not the same for Descartes, for Rousseau, Proust, Barthes, Duras, Marie Dariussec, or myself, or any of you. And the person, in most of these autofictions or auto-theories, does not even need to be a first person. If I may indulge here in a bit of auto-citation, I'll note that one of my books, Not One Day, which was published in 2002 and deemed not by me to belong to the genre of auto-theory, is written in the second person. And you've just seen in the fragments of a lover's discourse that this 1977 Barthes hybrid borrows the enunciative feint, a ploy of the third person. And go back to Descartes. Even in the second meditation, this ego, before it can become the subject of ego cogito, ego sum, has to be examined from the outside, as if in third person, as ego ille. What is this ego? Qu'est-ce que ce moi? Okay, that's all. Now, it might not even be an issue of a subject per se. beyond the first person, the grammatical first person. Let me indulge in another anecdote. In 1998, Christine Angot published a book titled Sujet Angot. It appeared chez Stock. And Christine Angot, whom I had read but never met, called me and said, "Can we meet?" I said, "Sure." So we met at the Café de Flore, and Christine Angot said, "Okay, I've done a Sujet Angot. Would you do for me un Sujet Garréta?" Besides the fact that I don't publish much, I told her, even before considering the things, and I think I still believe it, il n'y a pas de Sujet Garréta. And there never was a book titled Sujet Garréta. And as a matter of fact, what is interesting is I'm probably not the only one she asked to produce a Sujet X. But it never came to pass that you could inscribe in a series Sujet X in a collection for marketing purposes or for aesthetic purposes of a writer, a woman, very probably, titling under the proper name, Christine Angot, Sujet Angot, or whoever after that. Okay. Now, why do okay, I'm going to jump, I'm going to go further than this. The auto. Go back to my title, which was, what's the auto got to do with it? You remember the Lacanian fable of the origin of autofiction. I recounted it earlier. It's a theoretical precipitate which would symbolize the desire of the new postmodern subject for self-diegesis. It turns out, in good Freudian or Lacanian fashion, to be a screen memory. The auto of autofiction is a simple car. The first occurrence of autofiction is not to be found on the back cover of Dubrovsky's Fils in 1977. It predates the encounter with the theoretical grid of Lejeune. The handwritten trace is located in the manuscript of which was going to lead to the book Fils by Dubrovsky. And it is hidden in the unpublished and forgotten residue of the thousands of pages of that book. And it links the two terms auto and fiction in radically different meanings. The auto of autofiction is not so much the self as an automobile, or better still, the condensation of a self and a motor vehicle. And fiction, a recursive mise en abîme of the book's dream. Autofiction, in its original instantiation, is the grafting or the collision or the infiltration of the Freudian dream logic onto a self-powered vehicle. And here you have the quotations from Dubrovsky's draft. I read it in French, you can read it in English. Réel, pas un doute, ça fait pas un pli. Suis assis là sur la banquette, dos de la main sur le volant. Suffit que je mette le carnet beige entre les doigts. Livre du rêve, construit en rêve, me volatilise. J'y suis, c'est réel. Si j'écris dans ma voiture, mon autobiographie sera mon autofiction. C'est réel si j'écris dans ma voiture. It is real if I write in my car. My autobiography will be my autofiction. So what first inscribes the new circuit is the pun and its logic. All right. I'm going to go back to something even older than that. I'm going to read it to you in French while you read the beautiful prose of Marcel Proust in Sodome et Gomorrhe. La voiture, we're back to cars, s'élançant franchie d'un seul bond, 20 pas d'un excellent cheval. Les distances ne sont que le rapport de l'espace au temps et varient avec lui. Nous exprimons la difficulté que nous avons à nous rendre à un endroit dans un système de lieux, de kilomètres, qui devient faux dès que cette difficulté diminue. L'art en est aussi modifié, puisqu'un village qui semblait dans un autre monde que tel autre devient son voisin dans un paysage dont les dimensions sont changées. En tout cas, apprendre qu'il existe peut-être un univers où 2 et 2 font 5. Remember the evil genius, le malin génie? Et où la ligne droite n'est pas le chemin le plus court d'un point à un autre, eût beaucoup moins étonné Albertine que d'entendre le mécanicien lui dire qu'il était facile d'aller dans un même après-midi, Litany of Toponyms, à Saint-Jean et à la Raspelière, Douville et Kettelholm, Saint-Marc-le-Vieux et Saint-Marc-le-Vêtu, Gourville et Balbec-le-Vieux, Tourville et Féterne, prisonniers aussi hermétiquement enfermés jusque-là dans la cellule de jours distincts que jadis mes églises éguermantes et sur lesquelles les mêmes yeux ne pouvaient se poser dans un seul après-midi, délivrés maintenant par le géant aux bottes de ces lieux, vinrent s'assembler autour de l'heure de notre goûter, leurs clochers et leurs tours, leurs vieux jardins que le bois avoisinant s'empressait de découvrir. The car modifies art. It modifies space and the possibility of its perception. It's standard, it's trivial. But let me elaborate a little bit more and I'll end more or less on that. Here I'm repeating, and it's a déjà vu for some of you, some things that I've already written somewhere else in a different language. Psychic reality, distinct for Freud from the historical reality of the subject, may only exist because the subject of the modern age launched through reality at the speed of self-propelled thermodynamic machines no longer belongs to the same space as the objects experienced and perceived. The Freudian unconscious, fictionalized by Freud on the model of a thermodynamic machine, is perhaps itself no more than the product of this alienation, dislocation, and spectacular delocalization of the subject by the machine. Just as it is transport or transportation that, according to Marx, turns an object into a commodity, taking it out of use and endowing it with exchange value, so it is a dislocation of the perceptual apparatus and memory from its immediate plane of reference, brought about by a new mobility and velocity that endows the subject with an unconscious. The thermodynamic machine that remodels and reconfigures the external world takes up residence at the heart of the subject in the fiction of an unconscious. You remember that the vehicle of the Freudian cure, its figuration, was a train, the famous scenic railway. And here's the Freudian imperative to the analysant: pretend you're a passenger sitting at the window of a train compartment. The operative and procedural fiction of psychoanalysis is modeled on the transport regime of the industrial age, with autofiction, i.e. the articulation of person, self-subject, and world generated by automobiles and highways. Psychic reality became, at least starting in the psychic reality started in the 60s and 70s to come off the rails. So there's something like an infrastructural work that is at stake in auto theory and autofiction. How to rearticulate an I, a first person, a subject, a world, and a perceptual apparatus. The new matrix, and now I'm talking about today, the new matrix of subjectivity is that of GPS zooms and drones. The I is back at the center of a fixed set of coordinates in a room with no windows, no doors, and is not torn from its place of origin by train or auto. But the vision of that subject is away and dislocated from the body. This is the topology of the film, The Matrix itself. Telecommunications has eat the I, and split it, and not simply in the form of the simulation that TV was. And this is why we got fake news. This is why we need to find new ways of stabilizing the matrix, which relates our language, our world, our perceptual apparatus, and our social dispensations. All of these have been thrown up in the air, not simply by the forces of technology and the dislocations of new means of communication, but by the general encroachment of capitalism on them. So I do believe that the déjà vu that we're experiencing again and again and again, all over, is the all over again reinscription and reworking of this matrix. Thank you.